7 chapters. And so the first chapter we're talking to Kevin Fallon about is around nature and nurture. And that's just based around Kevin growing up with his family, parents, friends, schooling, etc. And then once we've gone there, the chapters will evolve from there through to ultimately Kevin's life as a player at school, at amateur club, and at professional level. And then from there through to his coaching experiences. So Kevin hosts 45 years of coaching at a whole range of levels, including youth, men, girls, women, regional level, national level coaching, and so forth. So it really is a joy for us all to hear about his range of experiences over those 45 years. So chapter 1, Kevin, nature and nurture, and the subject matter is around Kevin Fallon growing up and telling us about your life as a child and a teenager.
There's an amazing thing. I watched a Martin Scorsese film, and it was called Goodfellas. And in that film, it's about a guy called Henry Hill, who was obviously a young lad growing up in the Bronx. I think it was in New York City. And he's a young kid, and this big Cadillac drives in. And he's looking at it, and out gets this, you see this foot come out with a very expensive two-tone brown shoe. Then you see a lovely creased mohair trousers. Then you've got the lovely camel coat, and then the lovely girls get out. And as a kid, he just says, all my life I've wanted to be a gangster. But all my life I've wanted to be a footballer. And it came actually from similar experiences when I think about it. I was a product of the street, as probably Jimmy Doherty is there. He's from a very similar background to me and the same area basically. And we played in the street, and I've been coaching that long. I can remember when the milk used to come in with a horse and cart. So the horse and cart would bring the milk in and some orange juice, and your mum would send you out for the pint of milk. You played in the street, you had to be aware there wasn't that many cars, not many people had cars. You played under gas lamps, it was perfect. For about every 30 yards would be a gas lamp on each side of the street. So you had your floodlights, which was absolutely brilliant. If you went out on your own, and if you were lucky enough to have a ball, and I'll come to that in a few minutes later, if you were lucky enough to have a ball, because we often bought these little plastic balls, and if they bust in somebody's rose bush, you'd be lighting a lighter or a match to get it running and put your finger over it so it could mend the hole because they were plastic. And they were perfect for kids, little plastic balls, because you could head them, they didn't hurt you, and you could swerve them because they were like balls. I think we call them Fridos. Yeah, Frido balls. And if you weren't well off, you couldn't afford them all the time. So it's never the same having a flat ball if it's not bouncing. So if you went out on your own, and this is an amazing thing because today as a coach I often employ this, you'd look at your facility around you, and gates were your friend, walls were your friend, garage doors were your friend, because that's where you started knocking the ball. Right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. And you were doing it for ages on your own. You didn't have to go, you didn't have to fetch it. If it hit the curb, it'd bounce up and you'd volley it into the gate. So you had a natural environment there. And then if somebody came out, let's say it was somebody who was a good player, he would actually teach you things that you didn't know. So inadvertently, he's showing you things, and the way you go, you say, no, swerve the ball that way, outside of the foot, outside of the ball, and so on. So the street was such a place to learn things like, and you'd be there. The girls would be out kind of skipping rope to the gas lamp, and they'd be skipping, and you'd be playing football. If somebody else came out, 2 or 3 people, you'd have one in the goals and playing 1v1, and you'd build that eventually into a 5-a-side team. You're playing 5-a-side, and I've seen on Sundays when the men have been to the pub and had a few drinks, because it was a big mining area. A lot of people were miners, and the others worked in steelworks. So they were in, like blacksmiths and steelwork people. Real hard graft it was all the time, and it was a place. On Sunday then, if they saw a game, the men would roll up the trousers and they'd join in as well. So now you're playing probably 22 a side, and everybody would be, as I said, helping each other on and showing people. So the environment was very much responsible for me playing football, because you played it in the streets. My dad was a worker, he was working 7 days a week, my mum worked as well. They were nothing to do with football. So the big influence was the environment, without a doubt. Nature, nurture, for me, it was certainly nurture. And I bore that in mind when I had my boys a little bit later, but I'll come to that later.
What part of England?
It was South Yorkshire. Here's another thing as well. In the place where I lived, you had Rotherham United Football Club, who were the local club, Sheffield Wednesday Football Club, Jimmy's won Sheffield United, you had Doncaster Rovers, you had Barnsley, where years ago I sent Rory to Barnsley to a friend called Colin Walker. You had Halifax, Bradford City, Bradford Park Avenue, Leeds United, Chesterfield, Doncaster Rovers. They were all professional clubs in South Yorkshire. So when you think of it today in New Zealand, we've got one professional club called the Phoenix. So that was just in one little county. You could almost throw a blanket over it, because that was an industrial area. Everybody grafted and everybody worked. Nobody was on the dole. It was a real working class environment. And they followed the football teams. They'd knock off on Saturday afternoon early, and off they'd go to the ground. The men would go to the ground and watch the game. And in them days, the other thing was, if you looked at a team sheet, probably 9 or 10 players from Rotherham United Football Club would be born in South Yorkshire. You wouldn't have all these people from South America and Russia and Africa. There were English people in the game. And that's when England was a force, of course, in world football. But it was very motivated for football. There was hardly any rugby. We did have a professional rugby team eventually. I think it was a Doncaster team, but they weren't very good. The rugby league was more or less Wakefield Trinity with rugby league. They were also South Yorkshire. So there's a little bit of rugby league. Rugby union was played in the grammar schools, and I went to a grammar school eventually. But that was basically rugby union. You'd have your football. We'd never call it soccer, we'd call it football. And there'd be a little bit of league in other areas. So that was the environment. You
mentioned earlier the boy with the ball. So when we go now to key influences, shall we start with that?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's good. The boy who had the ball was a boy called John Key. So John Key was about 3 years older than me. And he was always guaranteed he'd have the ball and come out. And he knew every rule under the sun. Anything you want to do with rules, he knew. He ended up a Football League referee. I saw him turn the telly on, John Key's at Old Trafford, doing the Manchester United match. So it was years as a Football League referee, so he did a great job. I mean, that kid from 2 doors down with the ball, he ended up a ref, and he was like that as a kid. He knew every single rule. You could see a ref which he was blossoming. So he'd tell you all about free kicks and offside, and we didn't have a clue at that age. But he wasn't a great player, but he had a ball, so he was a great friend. Great friend.
Good. While we're on the subject of influences, feel free to go through your list of coaches who played a big part in your football as a youngster.
Yeah, I'll just say before that is, once we got cracking and playing football, if you played I remember us playing marbles in the streets. It was like a little hill. I was playing marbles and this guy called John Wadsworth, he came past and said, "Do you fancy a game?" And I was about 8 years old. I'd just started actually watching the cup finals. In them days, the cup final day was massive. The street would be empty, it'd just empty out, and you wonder where they'd gone. There weren't many people with television sets. We did have one, I'll never forget, it was called a 14-inch Murphy. It was a TV set, a little square thing, and everybody watching the cup final, which was the 1956 one with Manchester City, and I think it was Birmingham. Manchester City won, and Bert Troutman broke his neck, the goalkeeper. So I was playing away there in the street and wondered where everybody is, and they're all watching this game, and they'd come out and they say to me, "Did you watch the cup final?" I said, "No." He said, "Oh, Bert Troutman broke his neck." I said, "Who's Bert Troutman?" He says, "The goalkeeper." And then somebody said, "Well, he was a German." And this was about 8 years after the World War. And if you're playing games, throwing stones at each other, which was an average Rotherham game, the kids would get bricks and throw them at each other. Nobody wanted to be the Germans. But Bert Troutman was a hero. He's a massive hero at Manchester City. He broke his neck and played on. And his vertebrae in his neck was repaired about 24 hours later. And they won the cup. They won the cup, and he was the hero. But he said to me, "Do you fancy a game?" I said, so I went with him, and it was a trial for the school team. And I was only a year second year, so there's like first, second, third and fourth year kids. And I got him decided right back, chiefly because I could kick the ball from the penalty area over the halfway line, so he saw me as a defender, he could boot it away. But from the day that I got in that side, they used to give you then the school shirt, and it was a yellow one with white sleeves. It was called Sunnyside School, and they were a very good football school. From the minute you got in that team, you were a celebrity. People would say, oh, this young Fallon, he's not a bad player. And that you were judged as a football player. Everybody thought that, oh, you felt great. People knew you as a football player. They didn't know you before then. And so that for me was a big step forward. And then of course you meet people like a guy called Mr. Moore, and this is a very poignant thing. I've met a lot of people along the way who've helped me. I've not been in coaching for 45 years. You know, for any other reason, that the right time, the right place. In fact, even today, somebody rang me up and I thought, that'll do. It's somebody who I know and he's a centre back and I need a centre back, and he's rang me up and he's coming back from America, and I had him a few years ago and he's a good player. So I said, thank you, that's another one. So I've always had a big hand, and going to that school, Mr. Moore, who helped me in the junior school, said to me, go and see Mr. Jeans. So I went to see this teacher called Mr. Jeans, and I gave him the note that the guy gave me, which I presume has something on there. He's not a bad football, his little rat bag, but otherwise he's not a bad football, he might play him. So I got a trial there, and I got in the school team at the grammar school, and that evolved eventually into playing for Rotherham Boys. That was like your area boys team, and they played in the English Schools Trophy. And when they'd play under floodlights on the main ground at Rotherham United Football Club. I then got in the Yorkshire boys team, in fact I captained them, and I played at Jimmy's old ground, Sheffield United, Bramall Lane. And we beat Lancashire. We beat them 3-1, I scored on the day, and I was marking a man called Joe Royal, who was a very famous Everton football player later. And Roger Kenyon was there, and so on. They had a really good side, but we beat them. And that eventually led to England trials, and that's once you got on that little pathway, there was 7 clubs wanted me as an apprentice, and I didn't really know what was happening. Don Revie came to our house. Don Revie was he was the England manager, but he's also the famous Leeds United manager, wanting to sign me as an apprentice professional, because that's what happens when you're 15, and to go to Leeds United. But my mother didn't want me to leave home, and it was only about, Leeds would be about maybe 35 minutes down the road, but oh, you can't leave home, you're too young. So I stayed at home and signed for Rotherham United Football Club, who were then in the 2nd division, which is now the Championship. So it's still very good standard of football. And when you get there, you're playing in a 4th team, then under 9 team, then reserve team, then first team. So there's 4 teams that you can come through before you get to the first team. So that basically was the rise. But the big point was, you're on a treadmill and people spot you and send you on to people, because in England there's a big thing called scouting. People go and watch players play. People report back and say, go and see him, he's a good player. Go and see him, go and see him. We don't have a lot of it in New Zealand. We have some, and I got a system going when I was at Mount Albert Grammar School, so we've always been working with good kids. But there's heaps and heaps and heaps. If you're good enough in England, you'll get signed probably as an apprentice. But I think I should say to you, just briefly, an apprentice's life wasn't easy in them days. You went to the ground about 8:30, you'd get changed into
usually old tracksuits and shorts, because your first job might be to sweep all the rubbish from 20,000 people, because Rotherham would get probably between 10 and 18,000 people in the 2nd division. Imagine when they all dropped, everybody smoked in them days, they dropped the fag packets on the floor, chocolate to go on the floor. In fact, we used to find all kinds of things that I won't discuss on the floor. We also used to find wallets with money in it. It was a real treasure trove, and you sweep all the rubbish. That was one of the jobs. The other jobs was you cleaned all the football boots for the pros. So if you were a professional, you might have 3 pairs of boots, and I had to make them spotless, otherwise I'd be in trouble. You had to then take all the t-shirts, shorts, socks, towels and tracksuits to Connie and Mary, who were doing the laundry. So you had to carry all that and help out with the laundry. In the off-season, Rotherham played in red and white, so you painted everything red and white. Everything on the ground was painted. You did all the painting. You helped the groundsman to fork the ground, or if it was in England, you can have a frosty day where it's just frozen. They put little coke fires all over the ground, and they like them, so it melts the grass, it melts the ice on the grass. All them were jobs done by apprentices. Now they don't do that, and I think they miss a lot, to be honest with you. The kids just go there, they do a school course, and they do some training, but they don't do any work, and I don't think it helps them any. I think that you were better when you had to do a little bit of work and a little bit of graft, and so that was one thing. So the apprentice system is still in place, by the way, and a lot of kids go to England and they see them off the trials in England. But I will say this to you, less than 1% of English kids get signed on YTS forms. They call it now YTS, it's the apprenticeship. So you're a young professional, now they sign you at 16 years of age, not 15. There's less than 1% of English kids who've actually been brought up in the environment, less than 1% get a contract. So it doesn't augur well for kids from here going. And so when I look back on my two lads, I trained two lads, many lads, but my own two lads. One got signed at Liverpool Football Club, which is unbelievable, and one just had done about 500 games in the Football League, which is even more unbelievable. You know, so we must have been doing something right, because a lot of the British kids did fail to get a contract.
Would you like to mention some other key influences growing up?
Yeah, when you get to the professional stage, you start hitting now. The first coach who ever signed me was a guy called Danny Williams, and I think as coaches you can look at yourself here and think to yourself, where do I drop in this category? How do I do this? Danny was a guy, his nickname was Dudley Dan, and a Dudley is a drink container that the miners put round the neck and take down the pit. It's like a can with a cork in it, and they drink out of it. It's a Dudley. And his nickname, he'd worked in the mines for years, and he played 627 games for Rotherham United, which is massive, absolutely massive. And he got to be the manager. In those days, you didn't have coaches who went on courses and they did diplomas and they did degrees and all these sports degrees at Unitec and probably here, tertiary education. Most people came from professional football to take a team. So they'd had no experience of teaching, that come from professional football. Many of them were lacking as regards. Danny was a fantastic guy. I mean, he's probably the friendliest guy. He's a type of manager who'd see you at the bus stop, because he used to live a couple of miles down the road in Maltby, and he'd drive past me in the morning, but he'd stop and pick you up. That's very rare for a manager, that they let you get on the bus and walk. But he used to pick you up, and when he used to pick you up, he might say to you, "How did you go on, lad, at the weekend?" "Oh, we lost, boss, 2-1. Because you call them boss. That's or Mr. Williams. And he said, and he knew how we got on. And he'd say, "I heard your heading wasn't very good." And I was a centre back, so if you weren't heading well as a centre back, it's the kiss of death. It's like a prop not being able to shove. So he got me out on the pitch. I mean, I'll never forget it. He used to, "Come on, young un, I'll take you out." So in the afternoon, when the first team had finished, they trained in the morning. He'd take me out, this bag of balls. And these old balls are nothing like the balls today, actually, nothing like the balls today. They were almost twice the size, almost like rubbing sandpaper on your brain. They're all brown, caked in mud, and if you shook them, there was like a pea inside. You could hear it rattling. And if you walloping these balls across, you talk about concussion, and if you're heading you out, this would go on for about an hour. So when you'd finished, you go to the next game, and I thought, if there's one thing I don't want to do today, I don't want to stuff up that first header. And if you did, you thought, "Oh, no, he's going to get..." And he did, he used to get you again. So eventually, because the practice was so difficult and so hard, you worked hard not to be there. But he was a really good guy, very, very friendly, and always asked about you. Then he left, because he took me to the club, and he was quite a personality of the town. He had a sports shop, and he was a very likeable man. And we got another coach called Jack Mansell. So he's my second one now, so I'm now 16, I'm 15 to 16, we've got a new coach. Now this coach came in from Telstar in Holland, and he was, where Danny did have baggy tracksuits, he'd have almost tailored ones in them days. Where Danny had an Hillman imp, he had a Rover 2000. Jack was really one of these who looked absolutely spot on. And he's what I would call, he was a well-respected coach because he could coach. Although we didn't like him, he could coach. He was a better coach than what Danny was, and he'd come through, I think, the Loughborough College scheme, and it had been one of them. And he was a business-like coach, so he pushed you and he wanted things and he's querying you. But he wanted a coach that you loved. And eventually, of course, he was the one who tore up my contract. He signed me as a young apprentice pro 12 months before he should have done. And then as a young player, when you sat there waiting to go into the manager's office at the end of the season to negotiate your new contract, one of the older lads said to me, "Oh, what you on?" I said, "Oh, £14. He said, "Ask him for another couple. I should be giving another couple." So I went in there, and of course he wasn't happy because he said, "I've just give you a 50% rise, you know, from being an apprentice to a pro." He said, "Well, you think about it." In fact, no need to think about it. He got the contract and he ripped it up in front of my eyes. So I knew from that point it was going to be a rough year for me. And it did. It ended up, he gave me what they call a free transfer. And that's a massive thing. When you get that, so you want to be a footballer, then suddenly he said to you, "You're down the road." So here you are now, I think I was 18, I've got no football club. I remember getting on the bus, I think, what am I telling my mum and dad, you know, you're just a kid, you're living at home paying board. I remember driving past, and Jimmy will remember this, you used to drive past on the 87 bus, and you often go past places like Winkerbank or Attercliffe, and you see the factory doors open, and you see men pouring hot steel, got big leather aprons on, and you can see all they're sweating like hell. And then you go past the slag heaps where they're dropping all the slag down, all the coal. And I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? I'm supposed to be a footballer, but I've got no football club. So it was a real dilemma for me. I mean, I didn't tell my mum and dad for about a month because they put a retain list out, and that comes about. They usually get rid of you about March. They give you a month to fix yourself up, and they put a retain list out. So it's what it is. It's very much on the nose. They don't beat around the bush in England. You're a professional footballer. If you don't fancy it and you're not doing it, you're gone. You're down the road. And that's what happened. And what I will say though, Jack Mansell, the guy who fired me as a young player, was probably one of the best coaches I ever had. He could coach. His sessions were good. So you've got to differentiate there between can he or can't he. Danny was fabulous, but he couldn't coach like Jack. Jack was not the friendliest guy. He didn't want to go out and die for him, but he could coach. And then after that, of course, I went to Ireland. I got a professional contract at Sligo Rovers, and Brian will probably know all about Sligo. It was heaven really for me, to be honest, because I've been working in between the football seasons. I think I told you the other day I was working in a night spot for about 2 months as a bouncer. One of my jobs called the Cavendish Club. And I was on the door one day and a footballer came in, Mickey Walker, and he said to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "What do you think? I've got the old monkey suit on with the collar and the tie and everything." And he said, I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm in Sligo." He said, "Do you fancy a trial?" I said, "Can you get me one?" He said, "Yeah." So I tell you what, he rang about a couple of days later, he rang the club and said he knew a centre-back who got a free, and away I went to Ireland, and I had to give up the job for looking after people like Diana Dawes, which was one of the roles. I don't know if you know Diana Dawes. She looked very much like Marilyn Monroe, but you've got to look after them. The bouncers are told to look after them, and you've got all kinds of daft jobs. But we gave that up quickly for football, and I was in Sligo, and I was on a month's trial. I got booked 3 times in 4 matches and sent off once, but they signed me. Because I was desperate for the contract, and I got the contract for the year. And I don't know if you're aware of Sligo, but it's called the Yeats Country. William Butler Yeats is a world-renowned poet, and all the places like Ben Bulben and all the places he writes about are there, Strand Hill, and it's beautiful. So I was in Sligo with this, I think there was 10 or 12 League of Ireland clubs, and Sligo were one of the few clubs actually with professionals. Cork Celtic had professionals, and maybe, I don't think Shamrock Rovers did. They were a great Dublin club, but from Milltown, they played on the international ground, and St Pat's at Inchicore, but it was a good league. A lot of players used to come out of that league and go to England, and eventually that's what happened to me. I got in the All-Ireland final called the Blacksmith, and we played Coleraine in the final, and you're mixing with good players. I'm a guy called Des Dixon, who was a very good player, and then we got in the Irish Cup final, and we got beat after 3 replays with Bohemians, and there was 30 to 40,000 people at them cup finals, 3 in a week. It was Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and we eventually lost, and I ended up at Southend United. Their manager's watching the game, and he saw Ken Turner, I player manager, and I ended up now in Southend, which is about 50 mile east of London. So I'm now down in the south of England, and for Yorkshire, that is a long way. We never fancied around the London area, but again, it was a good setup. But the coaches, I will say this as well, in Ireland, I was under 2 coaches who were player coaches. So they'd been football players only, they'd not been coaches. And you could see the difference. I mean, one of them, the one who was at Sligo, Tony Bartley, you'd feel that he used to make up the training sessions on the spot. You know, I've seen him come, to training, and you've got to bear in mind it's professionals. About half a dozen of us train in the morning, then we join with the part-timers twice a week in the evening. But his sessions, I think, were just pointless, and you could see just being a player. He was nowhere near the quality of Jack Mansell. And the other one who took over eventually, he was a good player though, Tony Bartley, very, very good player, and he's a player coach. Ken Turner, who took over from him, he was very friendly as well. So I think it was more like he wanted to be popular as a coach, Ken. And he actually took us to the cup finals. He was the one who got us to the cup finals, and it did work for that season. But I don't think long term, once them players had turned over with that kind of approach, wanting to sort of impress the players and be friends with the players, it's probably not the way that I felt it should have been, and certainly not the way that I employed later on. So I ended up at Southend with a guy called Arthur Rowley, who was a legend. He just got hundreds of goals in the Football League at different levels. He played chiefly for a team called Shrewsbury Town. We hardly ever saw him, because what you've got to realise in England as well, there's a manager and a coach. The manager is in the office. He signs the players, he picks the team, he disciplines the team, and he might send the coach out to take the training. Well, Arthur we hardly saw. The lads used to be running around the pitch and say, is it Arthur or is it a cardboard cutout? They didn't know whether it was him, because he hardly ever turned up. So Arthur was there very rarely, and he certainly didn't do any coaching or anything like that. He had a goalkeeper coach called Laurie Leslie. So I'd come through England, with 2 or 3 clubs there, and same through Ireland. I'd not yet bumped into what I felt was because I wasn't coaching, of course, then I was a young player. But I never bumped into anybody who I felt was, really good coach. Jack Mansell, without a doubt, was the best of them and the most organised for what we look at.
New Zealand postcard.
Oh, yeah.
And then the plane ride.
Eventually, Southend dropped through, and I got a free transfer. So there's another. So you get another disappointment about 18 months later. And at this stage, I was working behind a jackhammer. I don't know if anybody knows what a jackhammer is. But the Irish, my dad's Irish, and the Irish are very good behind jackhammers. And I was working hard, and I thought, and this was in an English winter, and I was playing part-time for a team called Ilkeston. So now I'm gone down the chain, and I'm playing part-time football, what you got paid for. You have to go in there twice a week now, which I didn't like. I used to like my everyday training. And the coach there was a nice enough lad, but he's very much into the type of coaches I've had. Nobody was outstanding. And then I went home one night, and I got in, and my mother said to me, oh, there's a bit of mail for you. And this mail had dropped on the mat. We used to have a little conservatory, and she'd put it to the side. She's picked it up off the coconut matting. This is in a winter, which was one of the coldest winters out. You could look outside your window, and the snow could be that high. You used to shovel yourselves out. This is before you went to work. And I saw this postcard, and it was an idyllic view. It had blue skies, it had white, beautiful beaches and these white cliffs. I flipped it over. Dear Kevin, how do you fancy some sun, surf and soccer? And I thought, how do I bloody fancy it? I looked outside at the ice. I thought, I do fancy it. 4 months later, I was in New Zealand. It was Alan Vest, who used to play at Barnsley, and he knew of me in that area, South Yorkshire, and he was the Gisborne City manager. So he's the coach, Gisborne City manager coach. And I tell you what, in probably 3 months from looking at the postcard, I was there. I'd been to New Zealand House, didn't know where the hell New Zealand was, wouldn't have a clue. Didn't know nothing about it at all. And my mum was worried to death, because this is not like going to Ireland, which is probably 40 minutes on the plane. And it's not like going to Southend, which is about an hour and a half down the road. This is New Zealand. And little did I know what I was in store for. Because I got on the plane, And in them days, you could have a Rothmans at the back of the plane, and you could have a drink, and so I was there quite a bit during that journey, and with a couple of Kiwis, and they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Gisborne." "So what are you going to do?" I said, "Play football." I was a bit bigger in them days, doing my weights. He said, "What, rugby?" I said, "No, football." I said, "Soccer?" He said, "Well, I wish you all the best, mate." And he couldn't believe, I saw him years later, I mean, he just couldn't believe like the longevity that I'd had, you know, in my football career, because I got to Gisborne, and it was the middle of, obviously, we got there, it was April, it's like it is now. It's just getting a little bit colder, but I never stopped wearing a t-shirt for about 6 months. I'd be walking around with a t-shirt, and everybody's wondering whether I was cold, but when you come from Rotherham, I mean, you're not cold when you go to Gisborne. So I settled into Gisborne. I absolutely loved it. I got a job in menswear and as a player. But then tragically, I did my knee, and it was the ACL, which anterior cruciate ligament, which in them days was massive. I mean, they took out a cartilage, then they took out another one, and then they deduced that I certainly didn't have cartilage problems. They took them both out, but a specialist put me on a desk, and he pulled it forward, and it was just rocking. He said, "You've done your ACL." So I never got it fixed, but I started doing some weights, and I eventually got back to playing. I played until I was 34, but not with this. I was in my day I was quite quick, but I wasn't. After that, I was just reading the game and tidying up and working behind. Jimmy was in the side as well. Built a good side there, got people in the right positions, and I worked it all out as a coach. This will be good for you, Sammy. If they all did the jobs, I'd have nothing to do, and that's what they did. They did the jobs and got it cracking, and we won the league, we won the cup, and we had great times in Gisborne. We really did, in such a small place. But I will say this as well, Alan Best, he was a pillar of influence as well. He was probably, up to the time, probably one of the best coaches that I've had, and had experienced that in New Zealand. And he'd come again through the Loughborough College system. I got selected for the New Zealand training camp before I did this, and when I did it, they still brought me in. And there I met probably the best coach that I'd seen for a long time, a guy called Barry Truman. Now, he was an absolute gem as regards, he could do sessions. He could give you something in the game that was apt. So he'd look at a game, he'd analyse it, and then he'd say, "We need this and this," to put sessions in. And when we went to do the coaching courses, which was at Massey University, and it had places like this, I started coaching, and I thought I was trying to get a job then, of course, because I couldn't play. So I was a player coach, and somebody said, "You've got to do your badges, you've got to do this and that." So I went down, and like all cocky players, you think that you know the game, and you started doing the session, and then he said, "Do you mind, Kev, if I just take over this session?" And he'd take it over, and I thought, why can't I do that? And I'd look at the session, how he polished it up, and I thought, God, I've got a long way to go. And I came away from that course knowing that there were better coaches than me, that I'd got a lot of learning to do. I was young, because you've got to bear in mind, I was a 24-year-old player coach in the National League, 24. And the only thing I was good at in them days is telling the players what to do, because I was quite a character, and I had a good set of lads. But I did realise from that day on, I never stopped studying. I never stopped looking at good coaches. I'd go and watch sessions. If I saw a session that I liked, I'd write it down and pinch it. If I saw a player I liked, I'd try and pinch him as well. So we started to really work hard on the game, and that was mainly through a guy called Barry Truman, who suddenly he's up there and you're down there, and you thought, one day I want to be like him. I want to be a good coach like that, who actually knows what he's doing and can put his session on. It's a session that they need, and it's a session that you can improve your game.
Do you mind sharing your attitude around the coaching courses at that time?
Yeah, it was, I mean, Massey University from Gisborne was a fair little run. My wife will tell you, yes, I used to desert her every off-season. I'd go off to Massey and do a course, and I used to have an old ute in them days, and because we had like a farm lot. And I'd get down there and show people when I'm not on the course. I'd go on the course just to mix and mingle with people who were on the course as coaches, and people like Barry Truman, Alan Best. And eventually, of course, I was working on the course. I was actually an instructor for them. But I used to love that learning environment. I used to love courses. I didn't dislike courses. I used to get on them and do them. And I think you see a lot of things from there. You see different sessions you meet, and you can learn as much on these courses, by the way, after. Like when you're having lunch or when you're having dinner and you get together with another coach and you get chatting and you make contacts and you start talking about things, and it's always football, and you learn things off them as well. So I saw that as a tremendous learning environment for me. I definitely came on it. I did probably a lot of courses and sessions that I'd not had to do, which I did, and eventually, I mean, as time went by, of course, I ended up right at the top there with, and I'll come to that, but with FIFA, working with them and putting sessions on. So I benefited from that because I realised when I did my badge that I wasn't there yet. I'd got a fair place to go.
Thank you for sharing that. So in terms of the audience, do we have any questions regarding Chapter 1, which was nature or nurture, and Kevin's upbringing and experiences there, or any questions around Chapter 2, which was around touches in New Zealand? Chapter 3 is around coaching, Kevin. So right into the nitty-gritty now. And we're starting coaching. Kevin Fallon is a coach, and we're talking about originally when you started coaching, the why, how it started, where it started. Probably beyond your need. We know about the need? Yeah. Let's get into that.
The thing about coaching, I think, I started very young. If you imagine 24 and I'm a coach. And I had problems in the early days. I've got to go through this, I suppose. The first job I had at Gisborne City, I was 24 years of age. 24.
Coaching job.
And one of my players had played for Everton, which was so I'm 24 now, I've got a 32-year-old ex-Everton professional. I've got lads who played on Merseyside who were probably older than me. So there was a bit of a problem. I don't think they want it. What I did do as well, I always worked the teams hard. My teams are always fit. Anybody who plays for me, they work hard and they're probably the fittest they've ever been. If you look at the All Whites in '82, look at people like Sumner, Turner, I mean, there's not an ounce on them. We used to work them in the early morning and work them later on if they had to do it. Give them extra sessions if I felt they needed it. I wasn't the most popular, but I got them fit. So my players were always in that category. So when I went to Gisborne City and eventually got the job, which was 1974, I hit problems. And the problems chiefly were a lot of the older players weren't willing to accept. So this particular night, it was one of them Gisborne's days where you had this sort of searing southerly wind blowing down the ground. We were having a five-a-side, and I was there refereeing that five-a-side. And because my side never ever loses in five-a-sides, they just keep playing until they give you the win. And it keeps going on and on and on, so let him win. So at this particular stage, one player piped up moaning about a decision. And there was a bit of an altercation, and we ended up in a scuffle, and he ended up on the ground, and I ended up without a job. And he got fired as well. So they both that night, by the chairman, a couple of days later, he fired 2 future national coaches. Because it was me and a lad called Ken Dugdale, who's a great friend of mine today, by the way. So, but that's the kind of daftness that I got in as a young coach. I mean, that won't happen now because you don't fancy yourself in that situation to start with. But it won't happen now because you live and learn. So it was a learning process. I mean, that's the first job I had, and suddenly I'm down the road. And it was heart-wrenching in a way because I'm out of foot. I can't play at that stage. As I said, I wasn't even playing. My leg hadn't come right. I wasn't a player coach. I was coaching. So I went in one day to a friend of mine called Ian Gillis, and he told me that somebody had been in the town interviewing, asking people about Kevin Fallon, and apparently Barry Truman, the man who was my mentor in a way, for the knowledge, he had so much knowledge, he put a recommendation in for me, and I got another job. So I said to Mary, she was a nurse, I said, we're off to Nelson, and she really fancied that, getting out of Gisborne. She was a Gisborne girl. So we went down to Nelson, and then when I got to Nelson, I was fortunate, I inherited a young team, and I got some young players because I've been working on courses. I got people in. I pinched Keith Mackay from Gisborne, he was about 18. I got Kenny Creswell, Peter Simonson, John Slotmaker, Grant. I tried to get him, but he wouldn't come at that stage. And eventually, they all, I built a side of young players, and then we finished second in the league in 75. We won it in 76 and won the Chatham Cup in 77. So I'm on my way again. And that's what happened I suddenly had this mass disappointment. Moved town, just different kind of players I'm working with, younger players, and suddenly things went off for me, which was fantastic.
So that will flow well into recruitment. So what does Kevin Fallon look for in recruitment?
The kind of player that I always, absolutely love. Grant Turner was one, obviously, and Keith Mackay, because for a start they work. I want players who work. And I used to say to Keith Mackay, he's a type of player who, if you beat him there, you get past him, and suddenly he appears again, you've got to beat him again. And that's the type of player I want. People who've got good engines, people who've got big hearts, people who want to work for me. You've got to be careful these days with the tackling, because I wanted people as well, people like Sean Byrne, Grant Turner, you won't want to go in at Onnie Fowler. You won't want to go into a 50-50 with people like Onnie Fowler. You don't wake up in the morning and say, "No good, I've got Onnie Fowler today, I can't wait for it." You'd actually, you don't. They're my type of players, big-hearted players, players who love the game. Win, lose or draw, we're going to give everything we can out there. We're going to die out there. And that's what I look for, basically. The rest, there's much more involved than that. You've got like blend. I like left-footed players on the left-hand side. I like centre-backs who can head, obviously. I like overlapping full-backs. I like midfield players who ball winners, don't give the ball away. I like somebody like Jim in his day, somebody to receive up front and somebody to work off him. It's very, very simple. I mean, you look for blend. You don't play two players up front who are both receivers. You can never get in behind. So you've got to be clever as a coach and try and build. And you don't learn about blend on New Zealand football courses. They don't talk about blend. It's the kind of thing they don't talk about. Or management, all the myriad of problems that I had as a young player, young coach. You don't get that off a court. You get it from experience. You get it from having a kick in the backside. You learn.
Coaching beliefs. Now, we know there's a big range, but it'd be great if you could share some of your most prominent coaching beliefs.
I had some here which I've got it. I've got a diary, and I've had it in a diary since 1974 when I first started coaching. Day-to-day diary, and I fill it out. And every session I've ever done in my life goes in that diary. So I know about the game, I know about the referee, I rate the referee, I see who scored, I see the assists, I see the subs. I have a rating out of 10, I keep them. 7 out of 10 for me is a commendable game. If you're in your 5s, you're struggling. Very rarely do I give a 10. 9's a fantastic game, and 8, you've had a really good game. But I rate my players and I look at it. I don't put nothing to chance. I put the injuries in there. So I've got all the information in that book, even if I'm talking to a player like I was today, because I'm the type of guy, if I go to the toilet, I'm still writing out my team for the weekend. It's always on my mind what my team is, who we're playing, what we're going to do. It never seems to leave me. I'm doing that all the time. And so I keep that diary, and it's been so invaluable because I look at how I've changed over the years, not just personally, but my training sessions as well. So as I've experienced more things, and if now and then I'm thinking about a thing, it might be passing. We're always working on passing. I might think, no, I don't want to repeat that, I want to do something different. I might pull one out, have a look at that one. What did I do in 84 when we won the league? I might try that tonight. That was always popular, that session. Because when I look at my sessions, there's a certain type of design to them. We always have a warm-up, and it's certainly not the FIFA 11, because that bores the hell out of me. So we jog and stretch, usually, and I don't like running around the pitch either in the warm-ups. I could warm all you lads up in here, in this space here, and have a bit of fun. And I'll have a little game, we play a little game, and we have quite a number of them. And I like to get that part of I introduce what we're going to do and get cracking. But we always get a laugh You always get people. If people are laughing, if you get your team laughing, you get them feeling good about themselves. Even if they've lost the game, then you've got a chance. You know if their heads are down, and you don't want that. I mean, you can't change the result, because as coaches, what you have to facilitate for is how do you cope with losing? That's what it's all about. It's easy when you win. Drive away lovely. When you win, draw's not bad. When you're losing, how do you cope? Because over the years I've had to sort of come to terms with that as well. But after the warm-up, I'll always work technically. We always need technique.
Do you mind talking about core, your philosophy around core exercises?
In the warm-up, and I'm actually very lucky at the moment, because at Manukau I've got a gym owner, Geishan, and Geish he'll do all the core exercises, and it's certainly a little bit different from the ones I used to do, and still do. You know, the leg raises and the sit-ups, and they've now got all kinds of flash ones, much flashier. They're on the side, and there's all kinds of things. But they're very, very professional, and I've been looking at them and writing them down, because he does a great job. And he does a great job, why? Because he's a professional at doing it. He owns a gym. So I utilise that. Little Geish has got a job, he does a job for me. I've just brought that into my training. So that's a fantastic thing as well, you know. It's because as you get older, I will say this, I used to demonstrate to everything when you were the kids, when I had the centres of excellence and stuff like that. As you get older, you can go through other people. You don't have to do it all yourself. You can still kick a ball, but you don't have to be trying to be a 70-year-old Cruyff Turner. Nobody wants to see that, including myself. You know, so it's, you use other people if you can, because you're the boss, and and it's great for them as well. He's at the stage now, young Geishan, where he probably should be looking at doing some coaching badges, and he can probably adapt and become a little coach. So I'm trying to help him as well.
Some other key coaching beliefs?
Key coaching, I write things that,
Yep.
I'll begin to tell you this. In this diary, I've got a page, I put Fallonisms. And everything I see which remotely interests me, and I've got heaps of them. In my artistic moments, I used to design little cars and get them laminated and put them up. This was when I was at Max, and it might be things that are apt to what I think. It might be things like, and I'll have to read some I've got here. I've pulled some at random out for you tonight. But one of them is ABT. Can you remember what that means, Jim? ABT, I'll say ABT. Do you know on it?
I remember something about it. It was horrible, but I can't remember.
No, what? Can you remember on it?
Always be thinking. Oh, yes.
Always be thinking. Well done on it. So I said to players, always be thinking. And it's true. It doesn't matter where you are in the game. You could be, you're attacking our defence here, and I'm saying this to Wani heaps and heaps of times. There's our goal. Players coming down there. What do I shout to you, dog? Can you remember on? There you are. There's your two centre-backs. There's you, left-hand side. What's important to me now? Open up onto this side. So might be said, over your left shoulder, open up. It's all little things like that, but I've got some here at random. Somewhere. Oh, here we go. Don't just turn up. There's one of them. It's not enough that you've got to training. It's not enough. You've got there, great, lovely. It's not nice in the Auckland traffic, I know that. But when you get there, can you now give me 100%? Every pass, every movement, I want you to look like a footballer. I want you to polish everything up so that you're looking like a player, you're feeling like a player. If I'm working with you, you want to work with me because I'm giving you great passes and I'm pushing you and you pushing me. So that, don't just turn up, is very important for me. A lot of people think because they're there, that's enough. But I want people to give a lot more than that. Forever a student, that's a good one, because years ago when I couldn't afford much gear, a man called Ray Kerslake, he bought me a tracksuit, and there's a couple of things here, and I put on the back of the tracksuit, Fallon with Fallon. It was a football, I used to put it round there, and I might still have that old tracksuit. But I had other things, other little mantras like that one I've just read to you, forever a student. And then there's other things, like on the playing side, I've got the same kind of little phrases. There's one there right at the top, the pass tells you everything. If I'm going to pass to Jimmy there, and he makes a run, if I pass on this side, the defender is on the opposite side. So if I'm an intelligent player, I don't just pass the ball, I look, if Dinesh is marking Jimmy there, I would pass on this side. Now he would know that, he'd trust me and say, I can now turn that way. And I'm telling people, get on the half turn constantly. Football's a game, the goal, if we're kicking this way, the keeper is like this. He's looking at them. The midfield players are like this, the wingers are like this, they're on the half turn. So they're on the half turn. Most of the team, in actual fact, apart from your centre backs and your keeper, should always be on the half turn, all the time. So there's another thing I shout at them. Move as one, move as a team. If the left back's got the ball here, I'm looking what the right winger's doing. Is he giving us width? Do we need width? Is he making supportive runs? The team should move together. You don't just have 4-4-2 or 4-3-3. It's usually, if you look at it like a circle, you could, I'll just put it on here. There's your circle, and that's where all these rondos come from. When they talk about rondos in training, you've got your circle. Now that should be a moving circle. You've got your back four there, you've got your midfield four and your front two. That circle should be a moving circle wherever you go. If suddenly the player's over here and this fella's not pushing up or this one's not, then I'm looking at them. I want them to move together. It's called support. It's little things like that which make teams much more effective than they've got. And one at the bottom there, never give in. I don't know how many times, even at Manukau in the past, is it 3 or 4 years on it? 3? 4? I don't know how many times we've scored goals in the last few minutes, and I don't know how many times we've certainly turned what looked like defeat into a draw or a victory. We've got a great culture, because culture is what is culture? Culture is what you do, and that's part of our team. We've got great team spirit, and there's little things that they do which I really, really commend. Everybody comes in and shakes hands with everybody. It's fabulous. They're really good value, and that extends onto the field as well. I mean, people are working for each other. If I'm working for you, I'm your mate. I want to help you. I don't want to put you in, the duff. You've got in there working for you, and we do that very, very well at Manukau. So all these little things, and I've got heaps of them. They're part of the game. Some of the mental side, some of the technical side, some of the tactical side, but they're all short circuit things for the learning process where you say, I'm not the type of coach who will stop. I like to get 90 minutes. What I do, I set my watch. I set it for 6:30 and we start at 6:30 every time we train. And then I'll have 20 minutes for the warm-up. And then it'll go on maybe 20-25 minutes for your technical work, and then it goes on to your tactical work, and then you've got if you're doing your corgers as part of your warm-up, an extension of your warm-up, I could have it right at the end of it some speed work, or there could be conditioning. I usually do that at the end. If you're going to work people physically, I always send them home with that. I don't knacker them before we start. We've got a running routine we call 666, or increase in demand, or par-halves. If you're doing them, I usually get them in at the end. If I do it on a Tuesday, sometimes, because you've got to endure it sometimes as well, but never on a Thursday. Thursday I shorten things down, it's always speed work. And if we ever train on the weekend and we're playing Saturday, Sunday, it'd be a thing like set play and shooting, something for an hour. But I train for an hour and a half, but we probably get 2 hours work in that hour and a half. We don't, honestly, we work hard, and if people aren't working hard, I'll be onto them. That's without a shadow of a doubt. And I'll tell you another thing. You've got to differentiate between management and coaching as well. I think if you look at, I've met a lot of managers in my life in football. I've been very, very privileged to have people. I've met people like Brian Clough, Alex Ferguson, Malcolm Allison, Don Revie, Bobby Robson, Alf Ramsey, all through the New Zealand set. I've met some fantastic people. And if you look at people like Alex Ferguson, he's a manager. He goes out on the training ground and he watches it. If Fergie just turns up, the training will lift. He's only got to be there. And he just looks and says, hey, stop, come on. And there'll be instant improvement, without a shadow of a doubt. And that's the kind of impact managers have. He didn't actually take, Brian Clough never took the sessions. He he disciplined the side. So you've got that side of it as well, the disciplinary side of it. And if you've got a good crew, you don't need too much of that. But he actually did all that, Clough, and he was the one who looked at the players, and he just has to give them a look, and suddenly they'll lift. As simple as that. But he wasn't the one out there doing the training and the drills and everything else. It was a Jimmy Gordon. So I just want you to know that in England you do have a manager and you do have a coach. The manager's the big boss. He's the big boss. Sometimes, like Mourinho and Bielsa, who's at Leeds now, a very good coach, they will actually go out and do the coaching as well. But that's a rarity. Mourinho did that. There's probably one or two others who I'm thinking of as well who'll probably do the lot. There's not many, they don't all do that. There's two roles.
Do you mind if we direct you towards team talk and your philosophy around coach, if required, being an actor?
Football's really strange, and sometimes I walk into our dressing room, and it's usually a raucous. I don't know what kind of music they bloody play, but it gets on my nerves. And I've just got to look up. I'll just walk in. I might put my glasses on, and I just look around, and the music stops. Now, the time the music don't stop, I won't have a job, because again, well, the boss is going to speak. We better shut up. And that's the way it happens now. That's the way I like it. I don't like it any other way. And sometimes something comes to me. It might be something that happens in the room or anything else, and I design it around that. I talk a lot about our team. I'm not that interested in their team. I don't think we're not having a great season. We've won 2, we lost 3 and drawn 1. We will pull it round. I mean, we're suffering a little bit in the department that we know where we're suffering, and we will pull it round. But there's not many players in the opposite side. When I look at other players as well, because I always get their team down, the shape and everything. There's not many players that I've looked at this season who would get in my team. I've got a very good outfield team. I've got a team who scores goals. I've scored the most goals in the league, but we've let a few in. Our problem is defensively, so we've got to sort of adopt that. But as regards your team talk, you can't get away with the same team talk all the time. And I said to Jason, at times you feel like an actor. You're out there putting the team talk on, but it works. You know, you lift people, you might tell people, I mean, I work with some good players. I work with some talented players. I don't mind telling them that they're good players. I believe they're good players. If I tell them they're a good player, they're a good player. And they go out and play that way. And that's it. But I've got to believe that they are good players. It's very difficult to say to a poor player you're a good player. I do my best, you know, to try and get everything going. But I don't have bad players. As I said, I'm lucky. I've got a good group of players, and lads who work hard and are committed. Some have been with me for years. Some have been with me for years and years. You know, so they're in the twilight years, but they're still doing a good job. So it's the approach has got to be. I mean, Ollie Fallon came to me probably as 12, 13-year-old kid. He then used to take him to Gisborne on the private plane, and we'd go down there, and that's when the Russians were running Gisborne City. We used to fly out in a private plane. It used to be fantastic. And 2 or 3 of the kids come with him. Now, you can't do the same team talk. He's had me since he's 13. So you've got to try and look at things, and how can I change things around a little bit here now? It's not designed around him, but I'm sure he would remember, shit, I've had this team talk 58 times. You know, so you have to sort of look at yourself and see what your approach is like, which is what I said to Jason. You're almost like you're on stage, you're an actor. That's lights out, let's go. And that's what a coach has to be. You've got to have a little bit of that in you. You've got to want to front things a little bit and try and lift the boys and get them cracking again, because it's not easy. As I said, the difficult bit is coping with losing. It's not easy. You've got to really try do your utmost to try and get it better.
We're going to shift now to your experiences with New Zealand teams. Do you mind just sharing us what you believe some of your key ingredients to coaching youth are? And once you've done that, then and then once you've done that, then talk through your relationship with John Ads here.
Yep. Years ago, we had 2 sons. One called Rory, one called Sean, and for quite a number of years, they played in the house with little balls, balloons. I can't remember really what age were they went, Mary, when they went to proper training?
They played about 6 or 7.
Played at 6 or 7, but they didn't get heaps and heaps of training. They got a little bit. It was all technique. And about 10, when they were around about 10, they said to me, I want to be a footballer. I said, everybody wants to be a footballer. I said, if you're going to be a footballer, you've got to do a little bit better than you did at judo. So I bought Sean a judo suit, and his sister flattened him, and then he packed it in. So anyway, he committed himself, and so did the other little fellow. He tagged along for a number of years because there was quite a difference in the age. What was it, 6 years? So I got cracking with Sean and got him working, and a lot of people said it wouldn't happen for him and this, that and the other. But we worked him, and he had to work daily. From that point on, he signed a contract in my diary. Win bonus, appearance, it was like a contract, and he signed it and I signed it. So if you won, he got so much money. If he scored goals, he got so much money. And if he trained, he got his basic wage. So I set him thinking about football in that way. So he never missed training, because he would lose a fiver or something like that in there. It was a lot of money. And so he worked away training, and I used to get him up about, I don't know, he used to be down there about 6:45 at East Coast Bears ground, the old ground near the back of the shops there. And there's another young lad called Lee Norfolk and Alti Ramadan and quite a few others who I've met later on. And they eventually built from him to 2 to 3 to 4, just like I told you. And suddenly I've got a 5-a-side running, and we got a group of kids there in the morning working out every day. That eventually, we then tried to get him into suitable teams. I had to travel him for a suitable team. I think we took him to Massey, where there's quite a few good, tidy little players, and so he travelled out of his area, and we started sort of designing something to get him to a higher level. Well, as I said to you before, at 15, I took him, Graham Souness, you've probably heard of Graham Souness. Stevie Highway was his youth coach, and they signed him at Liverpool. In fact, not just him, a guy called Tommy White, who trained with him as well, he got signed at Anfield. So 2 kids from New Zealand got signed at Liverpool Football Club. So they got 2-year apprentice, 2-year pro, which is a tremendous contract, you know, when you think about it. So it didn't work out eventually for them, but it's a big ask. It's a big ask to say, I will go there to Liverpool and make it in the first team. You might have to move on and make it lower down, but they were there for 4 years. And then later with Rory, of course, he went through the same process, and we took him to a lesser club, Barnsley Football Club, from a player who was at the club called Colin Walker, who played for the All Whites, who played for Gisborne City. He was from our village, my village in Rotherham, and he was the youth team coach, and he got signed as a pro. And Rory ended up playing for England under 16s, 17s, 20s. He got through the ranks. He just didn't play for the big side, which again is a massive ask. And he played 500 games in the Football League, from the Championship to the second to the third, you know, every division but the Premier League, but still made a very good living out of the game. And that's another thing, I think. When you look at footballers, you have to say to yourself, it's not so much the glamorous bit. You've got to say to yourself, did they make a good living out of the game? Did they come out of the game and they saved a few bob, and they've got a business, they've got houses? You can have thousands and thousands of dollars, but a lot of these top players end up penniless. You know, so you've got to look at it that way with football people. Did they get a good living? And it's not one season. I'm talking about somebody who's had probably 10, 11, 12, 16 years in England playing football. That's what Rory had. So that was, for me, was a tremendous success, and he's made his way. And there's other kids, by the way. I'm just talking with 2 who are very close to me. Lots of other kids, people like Jeremy Christie, Tony Lockhead, and won't remember them all. Lee Norfolk played Premier League. Lots and lots of kids who came through the system with me.
Repetition,
Yeah.
quality coaching, great parent support.
With them kids, I mean, obviously the parents eventually had to get the kids, you know, to these training and get them to school and get them football boots. And eventually, if they went to England, they had to risk an airfare, and I think the clubs usually paid for them. I knew the clubs well enough to get the digs. You know, so it was all worked out. But
Yep.
the system they went under, I mean, they became good because they trained daily. You know, they trained daily with other good players. and it was purposeful activity. What they were doing was what the professionals will be doing. The sessions they're doing is what the pros will be doing. So when they went to England, they certainly weren't. I used to brief them on England, more on the mentality. Because when you look at a football player, what is a football player? Technically, he's got to be a good player. His mentality has got to be spot on. He's got to battle with the British kids. The British kids are not going to help you play football. And if I'm a centre-back and I ask you, where are you from? I'm from Gisborne. Where do you play a centre-back? Well, you become public enemy number one. You're after my position. So I've got to be careful. And I used to tell them that. I said, you're going to have to stand up for yourself in England. Don't be the last in the queue. Get in there. Make your way. Don't be bullied. Get in there. And Sean went to Leeds United and said even getting to the ground was an ordeal. You know, with all the skinners that live around the ground. I mean, you had to be tough just to turn up. So England was a different place. You had to get used to that, and the training side of it. I said technically you had to be there. If you can't pass a ball and you couldn't control it, you've got no chance. If you can't run, the fitness side of it, if you're not fit, you've got absolutely no chance. If mentally you're not tough, you've got no chance. And then there's just the other aspect of it, the social side, where you say hello, goodbye, show good manners, show respect. I used to always tell the kids that. You know, be respectful. If you meet people, say good morning. Don't get your head down in your bloody phone and get there. Say hello to people. And I tell the kids that all the time, the kids I work with. They've got to be people who are respectful people to the referees, to the coaches, to the fellow players, to the opposition. There has to be a certain amount of respect.
Thank you. What was special around with the partnership with John Adshead, Kevin Fallon, with the New Zealand men's team? What were some of the special traits there?
It's a funny one, that one, because John always said he appointed me as a coach, but Charlie Dempsey, I don't know if you've ever heard of Charlie Dempsey, he's a big FIFA man, and Charlie always took a shine to me. He's a Celtic supporter, and he's a Scottish, and my family's Irish, and we love Celtic as well, and Manchester United, them Catholic teams. But Charlie is a person that I got along well with. He apparently told John Hazard to go and get me as coach. He was struggling a bit, John, with a few results in Europe. He got tonked about 7 somewhere in Scotland, and I was at Gisborne City, this is 1980, doing quite well, and then suddenly I got this phone call, and he said, we want to see you in Auckland at the office, blah, blah, blah. And they flew me up, and suddenly I'm the assistant coach of the All Whites, and when I say that, I was actually the coach, because John didn't do a lot of coaching. He did the management side of it, and talked to the press, and talked to the media, and he fixed up a lot of great, you know, even inside the hotel, he'd fix things up for the boys. It might be an impromptu little get-together like now, and everybody's got to give a song or do something. He'd work on the team spirit. It's very, very good that way. And I basically did the sessions and the reporting of the sessions, and all the reports that went to the FA came through me on the coaching side. So we're a bit unique in the time, actually, because it was like a double act. And John fitted in, and I fitted in, I suppose. We probably between us, we probably formed like a third person, because it went very well indeed. But we used to have little things like I don't work for somebody and don't have a say. So what used to happen, he used to say, well, we get our clipboards like you've got there, and he said, write your team out, and your formation. So we'd look and we'd say, right, in goal we've got Wilson. Right, full back, well that could be Glenn Dodds. Yes, centre back, yeah, we've got him. Bobby Almond, Ricky Herbert, yeah. And we go through the team. And we say, who you got? And give it, I said, you read yours, and he reads it out. We only discussed the players that we didn't agree on. So if we didn't agree on somebody, if we didn't agree on, say, Steve Woodin, which we did, he used to get all the goals, then we'd discuss it. And then we'd find and settle it out. And then ultimately, at that stage, he'd have the final choice because he was the gaffer at that stage. You know, so it was no big deal. We agreed on many things. It was a bit of a dream run, actually. I mean, I'd met John before on coaching courses, and he always made me laugh. He was actually a club comedian in England. John used to actually front things and tell jokes, and I used to go and watch him many times in Auckland. I mean, I used to watch the same old jokes and still laugh. It was really funny. I mean, so it was great to listen to him, and he was always in pretty good spirits and so on. So we were a very good combination. And I said he dealt with the press and all that type of thing, and then I just got on with getting the side together. I can remember he certainly didn't get up for the early morning runs through the forest in Spain, that's for sure. He'd wave like from the window like royalty. He certainly didn't get up in the morning. I'd see him sort of mid-morning, and then he'd drop into the afternoon session. So it was a good working relationship. No problems. He actually resigned. I didn't want him to resign, because when he resigned, I didn't take his job. I let a guy called Alan Jones have the job. So if I let him have the job, I'll get a bit longer, which I did. And then eventually I got the job when he got sacked. You know, so it was all like politics. So I stayed out of it. I didn't want to be seen as taking John Hadshead's job, and so I didn't. And even at the press conference, I remember Charlie Dempsey, when he had the cameras there and everything, said, "I'd like to announce a new coach. It's Alan Jones," and he almost announced my name, and it was actually another guy. So he was a bit perturbed about it, and he did say to me, "Are you happy?" I said, "Of course I'm happy with that, no problem." So I worked with another coach for probably 12 months, and he had things to offer as well. And away we went, and eventually I got the job. And so, you know, I was working in New Zealand for probably 10 years. I worked with the All Whites. I don't think anybody sat on that international bench more than I have. Various levels, it was going on for maybe 200 games. It was a lot of games and a lot of experience.
Thank you. For the audience, do we have any questions around Kevin's experiences with the All Whites and the World Cup in '82?
Just you spoke about that the hardest thing is dealing with loss. What about in a situation where you're going into the World Cup in '82 and you've got Scotland and Brazil, which realistically, everything being even, you've got no chance of winning. How do you sort of coach that scenario?
That's a good question. I'll tell you something. I went to the draw. John didn't go to when they did the draw, I was invited, but John, he didn't go. I went with Dempsey and went to the draw. And when we drawn Scotland, Brazil, and the old Russia. So Russia's now split into how many nations in Russia now?
I'll leave it to the audience.
But there's a lot of countries come out of Russia. We played the old Russia. So we thought, whoa, well. And to be honest, it was so exciting because you were going around and there's hello Pele, how are you? It was just fantastic. We were mixing with them kind of people who were at the draw. I mean, it was just a dream come. Imagine this, that was 1982. I left Rotherham in 1972. 10 years later, the guys who were on the back of the plane, I'm now at the World Cup finals. I'm now mixing with the FIFA and Pele and the draw and everything. And we got Brazil. And I'll never forget the night we played Brazil. Because I went scouting to watch. Scotland got beat 4-1 by them. They lost 4-1 to Brazil. And I looked at this team, and Scotland, by the way, I don't know if we got some real well-known football people who know the English game. Kenny Dalglish was up front. Graham Souness was in the midfield. Alan Hansen, he's Pondit now, a Pondit, he was at the back. And you'd probably remember more. It went on and on. I thought, that's not a bad side. They got done 4-1. Now, we ran out that day against Brazil and the grounds. The thing about Brazil, by the way, we were in a place called Malaga, which is on the Costa del Sol. Jimmy, you're into holidays and trips and tours, aren't you? It's a favourite spot, the Costa del Sol. Yeah? I mean, it's the place you'd go if you're on a honeymoon. You go to the Costa del Sol. But we weren't on a honeymoon, we were in the World Cup. But we went there anyway. Brazil. When Brazil play, you're in your hotel and suddenly you hear and the music comes in. And thousands of people are pouring into Costa del Sol in Brazil shirts. They've got and they've got everything. Bells. They even had, when we played Brazil, there's a guy up in the grandstand with a kite, and it was an electronic kite. And he'd have it dancing to the clapping of the crowd over our goal mouth. So this kite was dancing to the music. And when I saw the team play, I thought, the team's playing to the music. They sort of seemed to be Zico, Junior, Socrates, who's the other guy? Falcao. What a sight. I mean, they just knocked the ball around to the music, and the crowd was moving to the music, and the kite was going to the music. And it was just an unreal experience. It took them, half an hour to score against us. Because I tell you what, as a coach, my fear was, come on lads, you've got to work tonight. We could get embarrassed here. This could be 10-0. You know, it was a real fear. But they didn't. They dug in, and it took it. Zico got an overhead kick. One of the best he said he's ever scored in his career. It took that to open up the defence. We eventually lost 4-0. Scotland, with all them top professionals, lost 4-1. Our team were basically part-time pros. In the 80s, players were basically playing in Australia. Everybody felt, if you're playing for South Melbourne like Stevie Wooding was, they felt that was a great thing. But many were at Gisborne City with me, 4 or 5 of them. You know, so there was players who were still playing in our national league. A lot of that team came through our national league. So it was a tremendous achievement for them to play the top team. Because people in football will tell you, most people will say that's the best Brazil side ever. But it's the only side that won, the best side that won nothing. They didn't win anything. Italy knocked him out in the semi-final. But what an experience, and yeah, it was quite frightening. And as a coach, they really did well for me. I mean, they really coped. Very, very pleased with the performance, and it wasn't an embarrassment. I felt they did okay.
Just to start finishing off the night, let's jump right forward now to 2008, 2019. Football in the Now is the name of the chapter. Football in the Now. Last week when we met, you told me that you're at your best now in terms of people management and dealing with people and dealing with scenarios. Do you mind expanding further on that and maybe drawing back on past responses and now how you see things now and react now?
With a lot of coaches, you know, you go into football, as I did at a young age, you get sacked. And I always say to people, football's a terminal means of employment. At some stage, you're going to go down the road. And you've got to be ready for that. You won't all... If you stay around long enough, and by goodness, with me, I've stayed around that long, I'm going 3 times round. You know, I'm meeting the sons of the people who played for me. And if you stay around long enough, you'll get beaten. And often by people that you've taught. I mean, the other week, we beat David Mulligan's team 8-1. Up to then, I'd never beaten him. And he was one of the boys I sent to Barnsley. He was another boy who had 400 games in the Football League. You know, so if you stay around long enough, they're going to actually get you. So you've got to try and cope with that as a coach. And eventually you're going to get sacked. I've been sacked a few times. And not all of the occasions do I feel should I have been fired. One was what we call an orchestrated sacking, which was the management wanted you out. I've been into clubs where the chairman said to me, your intestinal fortitude sorted out this club, which is now doing well, that club, but we needed somebody like Kevin Fallon to go in there and get rid of the players. And that's what I did. And that chairman still, he thinks the world of me today. I don't exactly think that he's okay. He's not a bad lad. I will say this, through all the sackings and everything else, I don't have any ill will, because I tell you what, soccer's been that good to me, it's not funny. You know, when I came from England, I mean, when I jumped on that plane and I've survived all this time, which I have in football, and when I went to that World Cup, and even today working for now with this group in Manukau, I've had some fantastic times through footballs. So I've never knocked football ever, or the people in it. I mean, you're going to get them kind of people in it. But as young coaches, here's my point: get used to being fired. I've never resigned, and mainly because I've usually picked up some money for not resigning. So when somebody says to me, I'm not going to renew your contract, but I'll pay you £8,000 for the rest of the year, so I'll take that. It's a nice little holiday. And that's how I've done it. I mean, I've always felt I could have done the job if they give me time. But if you don't get the time and they want to change things and go in a different direction, then I have to went in a different direction too. And it's always worked out for me. So when Honey rang me that day, I don't know, 4 years ago, so now I've got somebody who was captain probably my first 11 ringing me to do a job. And I remember the second they said, I'll need to be paid, Honey. He said, yeah, I know that. And we've been together ever since. It's been fantastic. I mean, I believe the coach always should be rewarded. If the coach works hard, I I think his time has to be paid for. You don't work for nothing as coaches. If you do, fantastic. But if you're in a game where you can get sponsorship and can get that, then I think you deserve something. If you're going to be, head on the line, the buck stops with you. If the team does bad, it's going to be you. If you do bad, you might have to move over. That's life. But I think you've got to have that firmly embedded in your brain. It is a terminal means of employment. If you get, I had 17 years at Mount Talbot Grammar School, 31 trophies, but eventually down the road, went to Manukau, then Manukau started winning. It has been very, very fortuitous for me coaching. Things have took off when I've gone there, so I've been very grateful for that. And what can I say? It's just been fantastic. It's been a great journey all the way through.
The last couple of weeks, you've had a couple of real testing scenarios within the football team, and the way you've reacted to them currently is a lot different to how you would have reacted in the past. Do you mind just shedding some light on those differences and your life experiences and so forth for those?
I think is that when you're coaching, what I like about players, I'll say, I don't put a lot of rules in place these days. I don't know if I did in the old days either, Jimmy. Did I have many rules? But I want players, if players are going to training, I plan my training all the way through, so everything's planned and ready to go. Then you get there, you might have 7, 21 players you work with, and suddenly 2 aren't there, and you don't know they're there. I like people to ring in and say, Kev, it's so-and-so, I'm struggling, mate, no problem. If I know, if it's family, things like bereavements, illness, you're going to get that through, as a coach. You're going to have to facilitate for that. So that's a big thing. There's got to be, you've got to be players who want to train. Like what I find out these days sometimes, players give you all the excuses for not training. In the old days, we used to give all the excuses to get off work to train. That's what we used to do. No matter what happens, I tell the boss I'm doing this and I'm going to train. It seems to have gone in reverse. Not all the time, but sometimes. So that gets me going sometimes. Players who don't listen, players who are way above, they throw a deafening, they're not urgent, they have urgent, they're just not listening. I don't like that. I'll often pull them, they'll get subbed. If they don't listen, they'll often get subbed. But what I've done in latter years, there's been certain players I've looked at and I thought, in the old days, I said, off you go down the road. Now I put up with a bit because these certain players can win you football matches. I ain't going to win the football matches. I'm not kicking a ball. I can help. But some players win the games for you, and you've got to absolutely try and get them players convinced, playing for you on song all the time. And often the ones who win matches for you are the ones who usually temperamentally are difficult. Over the years I've worked with players like Grant Turner. Grant was a tremendous player, but not every coach could handle him. And he used to come back to me. So I'd transfer him and make some money, then bring him back. And he'd come back to me again. It was fantastic, but he was a typical example where if he went to another, he seemed to be like a one-man player. He played well for me, and he came back to me a couple of times and did a great job. And there's been players like that over the years where I've looked after players who've been a little bit tough, but maybe other clubs didn't want them, but they've blossomed under me. So it's.
And would that be to do with your positive praise, your care factor, and your focus on life values and so forth, as well as belief, which you mentioned earlier?
I think now I'm probably a much different coach to what I was 20 years ago. When people knew me 20 years ago, the things like the teapot I get and the teacups and everything else, they would go, and I've thrown chairs out of dressing rooms, and but that's way past. I've got a different approach, much different approach these days to that kind of thing. Maybe with a few words, or see somebody, just pull them aside and have a yarn to them. But it's there's no necessity. I've not done that in recent years. But often people remind me of that, and that can't be me. That must be somebody else.
So, what's your advice to any coaches who do find themselves being very temperamental and very aggressive, or very verbal, or very physical to objects, etc.? Would you recommend that path, or would you recommend they consider other options?
Most clubs I've been at that I've sort of gone off, you know, off the map with temper or something and slammed the doors. And I mean, you've got to bear in mind when you come through England. And I'll tell you this one because I feel this is a funny one. Arthur Rowley, I remember we losing 2-0, and I hope the ladies will just put up with a little bit of language here. Arthur Rowley once came into the dressing room and we're losing 2-0. He opened the dressing room door. He's a big guy, had this sort of teddy bear overcoat on. And he looked around and everybody's got their head down because we're losing. Because if you get your head up, you're going to get it. So I looked up and he went, fuck me. And he looked again and he said, for fuck's sake, fuck you know. And he slammed the door and went out. That's all he said. So he said 7 words. F me, effing hell, and something else. And that was his team talk. And went out there and drew 2-2. It was absolutely crazy. That was Arthur Rowley, and he was that kind of person. That's all he said. You know, so there's some crazy things happening at half time. Crazy things happen at half time. But if I say to young coaches, I think you've got to gradually go along the way that I've gone, where you now, as I said, with players, you talk to players, you give them clear instructions, you're supportive. Your players should know that you want them to do well. You know, you don't pick players to fail. You want them to do well, and you've got to put that into your players. So I think all the approaches of Arthur's famous 7-word team talk, it might have worked on the day, but I don't know if it'd go down too well today. It's a different game to the professional football in England. You understand? It's very, very basic there.
So to finish off tonight, do we have a final question from the audience? Or is there a final message you'd like to finish with? Passion, performance, surviving.
Now, a lot of people ask me, you know, what was your greatest achievement in coaching? And I said, survival. I've been in coaching since 1974. And I'm still working today, so that's for me. That's just been an absolute, you know, pleasure and so many experiences. And I said when we set off with Manukau 3 or 4 years ago, I was going to places where I've never been, but people knew of me and said, "Oh, I met you there, or you're on the centres of excellence, or this type of thing." And I found that absolutely great. That you've gone to a different level and you're meeting different people and you're actually enjoying it, and it was very enjoyable. So it's been a real pleasure, and over the years, football's just been fantastic. I know it's not the major sport in New Zealand, but it's still it is the most popular one, by the way. More people play football than rugby in this country. It's a very popular sport, but it's not got the media attention, and we probably will never get the results like the All Blacks get, because the All Blacks are top nation in the world. I mean, we're the top rugby nation. It's as simple as that. We have to try and improve our football, and there's no reason why we can't if we get to it and get working and believe in ourselves. So there's no reason why we can't get up there. No reason at all. I mean, a lot of nations like the islands and there's other countries who are not so big, that similar populations who are a lot higher than we are. It can be done.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you join me for a big thank you for Kevin Fallon.